And to let you know a little bit about myself in this course, I've been a member of TNL, that is Thupten Norbu Ling, for several years, and I'm currently working on an FPMT teacher's certification. So there at the center, I've completed courses on minds and mental factors with Venerable George Churanoff and on mindfulness with Venerable Sangye Kadro. Other than that, though, I don't have any real special qualifications or realizations to instruct this material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rely on quotations from authorities and then provide explanation, answer questions, and so on. TNL has many excellent resources in terms of teachers. Any of the ordained faculty or lay teachers, for that matter, have greater experience and in-depth knowledge. And so I'll encourage you guys, if you wish, to consult with them if you have any questions that I'm not able to answer. This course here, Introduction to Mindfulness, is designed to introduce you to the definition, practices, and techniques of mindfulness. You'll learn to apply mindfulness to enhance mental focus by calming your physical tensions and mental agitations. You'll better notice your habitual thinking, and if you wish, change it through mindfulness. You'll also learn to nurture positive, wholesome inner qualities with mindfulness practice. And then this course is particularly suited for those who are new to mindfulness and would like to learn a simple way of applying mindfulness in your daily lives. So this course is intended to serve both Buddhists and non-Buddhists, but it's based on Buddhist concepts and perspectives. So for that reason, I'll keep my presentation general where possible, so to give a broad interest and applicability. So beginning meditators, or perhaps meditators who aren't so familiar with this tradition, are the target audience. But as I said a little bit earlier, the nature of the material requires some technical explanation. And I'll try and keep that as simple as possible. This will help you understand mindfulness in terms of this tradition, which may be very different from mindfulness you've encountered colloquially, in sort of current understandings of mindfulness. And of course, you're encouraged to comment, to ask questions. If you have experience and maybe it doesn't line up with something I've said, feel free to bring that up and let me know, and we'll see if we can somehow match up the concepts. So before I continue, are there any questions or comments about that quick intro?
No, I don't have any.
That's excellent. Okay, again, thank you for attending tonight. I think what I'll do is we'll begin with prayers, but in this tradition, really the prayer is meant to establish our motivation. So from the Buddhist perspective, the end result, whether positive or negative, of all our actions, body, speech, and mind, even our thoughts, is dependent on our original motivations. So if we create a good motivation, that is one that's focused on the positive benefit for oneself and others, it'll eventually result in a positive outcome for us, although we can't exactly be sure what or when that outcome will ripen. So another principle of motivation is the greater the intended benefit in the motivation, the greater the positive outcome. So even if we lose track of our motivation or become distracted, a positive motivation will keep the tenor of the entire session positive. That's actually a pretty useful quality of having a good motivation. And then actions of body, speech, and mind, that is what we do when we're meditating during this class, or even just sitting and learning about this particular tradition. Whatever we do, if it's guided by a positive motivation, will generate virtuous karma. And then we'll take advantage of that. We'll leverage that at the end in the dedication, at the end of this teaching or any meditation session. We'll use that. And I'll explain a little bit about that when we get there. So we'll just begin with a very simple prayer. But just listen to the words and see if it might expand your mind a little bit. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment to friends and hatred for enemies. And may I myself enact this. And if this resonates with you, this can be your motivation for sitting in on this class. Well, I thought we might begin with a meditation session just to settle a little bit, get our minds calmed down. This is the second session in this series of 4 classes. But don't worry about that. I've got some review planned. And again, if there's anything that I say that doesn't quite make sense to you, you're welcome to just jump in and ask me a question or make a comment. But let's begin with a meditation. This meditation is called Mindfulness of Breathing with Stability. So just relax and take a comfortable meditation seat. If you've got any questions about it, just save them for after the meditation, and I'll be happy to answer, maybe give you some perspective from this particular tradition on how we recommend you sit in meditation. Just basic instruction. So mindfulness of breathing with stability. So begin this session by settling your body in its rest state, imbued with the 3 qualities of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. We covered these last class. A relaxation is just relaxing your body. You might wish to do a simple scan up and down through your body, or if you're noticing any kind of tension anywhere in particular, say around the jaw or the eyes, the neck, the shoulders, those very common places to hold tension, just tell yourself to relax there, maybe move a little bit, just make yourself very comfortable. So 3 qualities of physical relaxation, physical stillness. So just try and let any nervous energy drain out of your body and just gently resist any impulse to fidget, scratch, move around as best you can. And then thirdly, physical quality of vigilance. What this means, if you're seated, it means to sit up straight. So, but with a natural elevation of the spine. So just elevate your spine, sitting up straight, the shoulders relaxed and somewhat moved back. Your spine isn't rigid, it's just got its natural curvature to it. And you can achieve that by just raising your sternum a little bit. That will help relax your shoulders down and add some energy to your spine. So that's what I mean by physical vigilance. Feel free to adjust as we go along with this meditation. You might encounter things, later, a few minutes on. It won't go on too long. It's maybe a 5 or 6 minute meditation. So just relax and enjoy the ride. So with your awareness permeating the tactile sensations throughout your body, for example, as I, like a scan through the body, just to see that you're all relaxed. It might take several tries to relax any sort of problem areas. So with your awareness permeating the tactile sensations throughout your body, take 3 slow, deep breaths, observing the sensation of the breath, filling your torso from the belly up to the chest. Then let your respiration return to its natural rhythm as we go through this meditation. So don't try and control your respiration at all. Just simply be present with the breath as best you can, breathing as effortlessly as you can. So without control, just natural breath. With this preparation, we've established a basis in relaxation. Without losing this sense of ease, now shift your emphasis to the cultivation of mindfulness. Mindfulness here is the ability to sustain the focus of your attention without becoming derailed by the force of any distracting thoughts and sensations. So, with this aim, instead of being mindful of the various sensations of respiration throughout your whole body, focus your attention just on the sensations of the expansion and contraction of your abdomen with each in and out breath. Out of sheer habit, unintentional thoughts are bound to cascade through your mind like a waterfall. One way of stemming this relentless stream of ideation is to count the breaths. Try that now by counting 1 at the beginning of your first inhalation. Then attending closely to the sensations of the respiration throughout the rest of the inhalation and the entire exhalation. Count 2 or wherever it is you are at the beginning of the next breath, and continue in this way for as long as you find it helpful. Let these mental counts be brief. so that your attention to the counting doesn't override your awareness of the breath itself. That was our original meditation object. The object that we're working to keep in our mind through the power of mindfulness. Why we count the breaths is to insert brief reminders into the practice, remembering to remember so that you don't get carried away by distracting thoughts. Attending to these mental markers at regular intervals in the course of the respiration is like taking note of milestones on the side of a country road, letting you know by their presence that you are on the right track, or by their absence that you have wandered off your chosen route. This phase of the practice is primarily concerned with mindfulness of breathing, not counting. It's easy to maintain just enough continuity of attention to keep track of counting, while between counts, the mind wanders off on its own like a dog without a leash. This is something we don't want to do. Let the counting remind you to keep your attention focused on the tactile sensations of the breath, which change from moment to moment. The in-breath, the out-breath, the pauses in between. The depth of the breath, the shallowness, regularity or irregularity. These are all things we can just observe. After counting the breath at the beginning of the inhalation, let your mind be as conceptually silent as possible for the remainder of the in-breath. And during the out-breath, release any involuntary thoughts that have cropped up, as if you were breathing them out. Arouse your attention, counteracting laxity during the in-breath. And relax your attention, counteracting excitation with each out-breath. So, breathing in, one tightens the attention on the breathing. And breathing out, one relaxes the attention, counteracting any tendency to excitation or distraction. And also during the out breath, release any kind of sensations, thoughts, remembering the past, planning for the future. Let that go. If you can do this, with each complete breath, you can remedy the two major defects of attention. That is, laxity or dullness, and excitation or distraction. Meditation is a balancing act between attention and relaxation. Mastering this requires working to counter the natural reflex of trying harder or clamping down when you see that your mind has become distracted. Instead, as soon as you see that your mind has wandered, release the effort of clinging to the distracting thought or physical sensation. Return to the breath and relax more deeply. Remember that the main point of this attentional training is not to stop thoughts from arising, which is almost impossible. Rather, it is first to relax the body and mind, then to cultivate the stability of sustaining attention continuously upon your chosen object, whatever you choose to think about. Thoughts are bound to arise. Simply do your best not to be carried away by them. Well, that completes the meditation. Anyone feel any different than when they first joined the class? I'm sorry, I muted you so that, yeah, go ahead.
Definitely more relaxed, and like I feel more present.
Yeah. Yeah. Even, yeah, and I feel that way too, even though I was reading the meditation instead of actually performing it. So, yeah, that's a really good observation. And in attending the breath, and then having a way to deal with distractions, that's almost naturally, automatically relaxing in many situations. Well, thank you very much for sitting through that. I mean, it's not easy to hear all of these instructions. There's some really interesting things in that particular meditation, and yet still keep your attention on the breath and your mind relaxed. And, oh, I'm inhaling. What should I do now? All that kind of stuff. Well, unless anyone has any questions about that meditation comments, Bill, would you like to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that, yeah, I felt more settled as well.
Yeah.
During the counting, I lost track a couple of times and I had to sort of reset. So,
it's actually okay if you lose track. Just as long as you remember to count. Counting isn't, well, maybe that's like a good thing, because you weren't putting too much effort into counting.
Mhm.
You were just focusing on the breath and the sensations and so on. All right, thank you for that feedback. Well, I'm going to do some review what we covered in the first class, and I'll go through it quickly, but please stop me if there's anything that arises that piques your interest. So we're really talking about the mind and what we call mental factors. Those are just components or aspects of the mind. And mindfulness is one of them. And we'll define that in a second, but let's talk about the mind. The mind is our subjective consciousness that perceives moment by moment the meditation object as a whole, like the breath that we looked at. And so you can just think of it as a container, if you will. And the mental factors, mindfulness is one of them. The mental factors simultaneously apprehend or engage with aspects of that object, the breath, in specific ways. Mindfulness just keeps it in our attention. That's how it engages with the object. A mind and its mental factors arise together simultaneously. They can't be separated out from one another. In other words, technically, they are called of the same entity. What that really means is just you can't have a mind without mindfulness under most conditions, and you can't have mindfulness without a mind. They're all part and parcel of the same thing. In this particular Buddhist tradition, meditation objects can be purely mental, internal to the mind, like emotions, ideas, or concepts, or they can be input from any of our five senses, like our body sense that was sensing the breath moving through our body. The Buddhist view is a mind that engages with a purely mental object is a mental consciousness or mind, and a mind that engages with a sensory object is a sense consciousness or mind. For Buddhists, the mental consciousness is, for most of us, it's, our conceptual, thought processes. So for that, the mental consciousness is the most important because it's the one attended and directly affected by the wholesome and unwholesome mental factors. So as well as the ones we're going to talk about, the mental factors that we're going to talk about, there are ones that are wholesome, constructive, if you will. And there are ones that are unwholesome or destructive. For example, the famous three, ignorance, right? Anger, attachment. Those would be unwholesome mental factors, which are part of how we engage with certain objects sometimes. So again, a mental factor is a component of the mind that is an aspect, characteristic, quality, or ability of the mind that apprehends and engages. I see you, Mina. I'll finish and then I'll go over to you. That is an aspect, characteristic, quality, or ability of the mind that apprehends or engages with the meditation object. For example, the mental factors we talked about last week, mindfulness. We're going to bring in concentration, wisdom, and introspective awareness. Go ahead, Mina.
Sorry. I'm wondering, with this type of mindfulness-based practice that we're learning, are you going to help us with like some tools? Like I find that a lot of workshops talk about like we have these afflicted mental states like anger, attachment, and so forth. But what can we put in our toolbox that when anger arises, that we weed it out? Or when jealousy arises, or greed, or all these afflicting emotions, when they arise, I would love to have tools in my toolbox to like learn how to eventually get rid of it. But what do I do?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And for the most part, any Buddhist teaching will, in some regard, cover those tools. That said that there's 84,000 tools. I don't know if there's ever been an exact count, but it's definitely said that there's that many for the various kind of problems and difficulties that we have. I'll be straight with you, Mina. What we're going to do is just cover those four mental factors. However, they can be used as generic tools. They are what's called the object ascertaining mental factors. And so they have a neutral quality to them, but they can be used to engage with you. I gave the example of unwholesome mental factors like anger or something. If you have these, and if you understand how these operate, you can use them to remove anger from your mind to some extent, and then replace it with your chosen meditation object, something positive. For a positive emotion like compassion or generosity or something like that. But first, even to begin with that, you kind of have to understand a little bit about how your mind works. And I can't tell you exactly how your mind works. I can only meditate in my own mind. But I can give you these particular tools that you can use to understand, first of all, how your mind works. You can develop introspective awareness to be aware of what is going on in your mind. Say you begin to feel the precursors to anger. And then you can apply certain antidotes in order to change your focus of attention, remove that. Now, there's many, many other different strategies to deal with anger, but I won't be talking about them in this class. So I hope that's not too much of a disappointment for you. But I do believe by understanding how mindfulness functions, then augmenting that with concentration and wisdom, and all of this supported and guided by introspective awareness, that definitely gives you kind of a lot of leverage in order to then apply some of the other more advanced techniques and meditations on dealing with attachment, anger, and so on. What do you think, Nina? Did that make some sense anyways?
Oh no, it's perfect. It's perfect. Because I do feel like I want to improve in my meditation because of many of the workshops that Tubten Norbu has available. I think it's now so clear to me that it's really important to meditate, because when you meditate is what you see going on in your mind. Although I feel like I'm aware of my mental thoughts when I'm doing things like washing dishes or walking or tidying up, I hear what's the chatter in my mind, but I think that's very different from actually sitting down and really observing and seeing what's happening, and then learning the antidotes. And I like that word that you use. That's what I was looking for, learning the antidotes to weed out these states of mind. And anger, definitely, I would love to have some of that in my toolbox. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, thank you for being so flexible. So we're going to lay the groundwork for that, to give you kind of, well, they say the mind, it's the mind that's the workshop. And so we're going to, set up maybe a bandsaw and a table saw and a drill press and so on. And then you'll be able to build whatever you want with it. I don't know. Let's talk about mindfulness then. So mindfulness is a non-forgetfulness of the mind with respect to a familiar meditation object. It has the function of non-distraction. Yeah, that's a lot of words. It's kind of a very formal definition. But what it really means is to be fully mindful is to allow whatever it is that we're noticing to come fully to mind or fully into our conscious awareness. So really, again, that means you choose, for example, to have the breath in your mind. And so you remember the breath. So with mindfulness, our attention is able to engage with its object without forgetting it or losing sight of it. It depends on familiarity. So the strength of our mindfulness is dependent on how familiar we are with the object, our ability to remember that object, bring it into mind, and keep it there. It's dependent on how often we actually do that process, familiarity. And the corollary there is, there's an object, when I'm using object sort of very generically here, say there's an emotion or a kind of, repetitive thought that you have that keeps coming up. Well, obviously, even if it's unpleasant, if you keep bringing it into your mind and dwelling on it, well, that's going to strengthen your mindfulness of it. That's why I say these are neutral. These are neutral mental factors. I mean, it's neutral like a bandsaw, right? If one moment of inattention and then it's like, all of a sudden you're short a few fingers. Well, maybe that's over dramatic, but the corollary is if you've become mindful of something of your choice, then you'll become less mindful of something that perhaps you don't want to linger in your mind. Just something to think about. And go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I've been wrestling with what the mind actually is, and it's sort of my perception from listening to lots of talks and so on, that the mind is, your brain, your consciousness, plus all of the senses that are feeding into the consciousness. So if I adopt that perspective, then mindfulness seems like very much like focusing attention on just one aspect of the mind or one object in the mind and letting the others sort of settle down. Would that be a reasonable way of looking at it, or do you have a better sense of
that's quite incisive, Bill. So yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, because I find sometimes that when I focus on this one sensor or one object or whatever, that I still have problems, but oftentimes I get into more of a mindful state when like I'm doing yoga, for example, and I'm just sort of shutting everything else down. Maybe the touch or muscle sense in terms of getting into a pose or whatever, like sort of takes over, and the mind shuts down. The mind, all the different whirly gigs going on, it should settle down.
Yeah, certainly. So you're on the yoga mat and, you're trying to follow the instructions of the teacher. Try not to fall over, exploring all of these maybe new sensations or familiar sensations, guarding yourself so that you're not going to hurt yourself, but eventually you kind of get into a little bit of a flow state, right? Mm-hmm. And as you become like more familiar, the postures become easier, and then you can just focus on them, become more mindful of them. So that's a really good analogy.
Okay, thank you.
So kind of, to follow on with what Bill mentioned about yoga, mindfulness is a natural quality of our mind. It's always there. It can be like fragmented and fractured and like weak, but we already possess this ability to pay mindful attention to what's happening in our life, whether we're on the meditation cushion or not, whether we're on the yoga mat or not. And so what we need to do is appreciate its importance to our well-being. Why do I say mindfulness is important to our well-being? Well, isn't a great deal of our life and experience dictated by where we place our attention, what we fill our mind with? I don't know if that's your experience. I think I kind of find that's, a kind of a pretty constant thing. So if we can learn how to nurture and strengthen this natural ability, then it's going to help us feel more healthy and interact in a more healthy way. So that was some brief words on the mind and on mindfulness. But there's 3 related mental factors. And again, these are all, I've called them neutral mental factors. They're colored by our motivation, basically. So we can have a good motivation or a destructive motivation. And they'll color these other factors. But these factors are concentration, wisdom, and introspective awareness. So if we're thinking about something, whether it's the breath or, I don't know, a mathematical equation or a problem we're trying to solve, once we're able to hold that in our mind, then with stability, we're able then to concentrate on it. This is a distinction in this particular model of the mind, but really it's a continuum. As you hold an object in mind with mindfulness, you begin to be able to focus and observe more powerfully. So the next step, the next stage on the continuum is concentration. So concentration dwells single-pointedly on a meditation object in a sustained way. And what its function is to support wisdom. The more intense our concentration, the more acute our wisdom becomes. So we start by just developing stability to bring something to our attention. And when it's in our attention, our concentration strengthens. This kind of makes sense. At least it does to me. If it's not, let me know. And we can call it focus. Sometimes you hear the words meditative stabilization or meditative concentration. That's basically the next step after stabilizing your attention on something. Once we have begun to stably focus on something, then we get wisdom. And what I mean by that is we just begin to understand what it is we're looking at or become more familiar with it, perceive different aspects of it. So wisdom here discriminates, characterizes, or evaluates the features of the meditation object. It illuminates the meditation object like a lamp lights up a picture in a dark room. So again, the continuum going from mindfulness, which produces stability, concentration, which produces focus based on that stability, and then wisdom, which comes from the concentration we put into looking at that object. You can think of wisdom as like intelligence, comprehension, understanding, discerning analysis, all different words trying to capture the same thing. And again, like in English, because this terminology and framework comes from the Tibetan, which comes from the Indian. In English, we'll often say, I'm concentrating on something. But in a way, what we're doing is we're telescoping all these 3 different aspects together. Making sense? Mindfulness, concentration, wisdom. So these are the tools that really help us apprehend something, really grasp and absorb something that we want to absorb, where we've chosen to place our attention.
So I have a question. So it's, I think I see that maybe coming from two different directions. One is, when you stabilize your mind and then you're focusing on something,
I think Bill froze. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I'm
The
sorry.
last 15, 20 seconds, Bill, if you wouldn't mind repeating that.
Okay. So I'm thinking about wisdom arising from two different directions. One is as you're paying attention to something, stabilizing your mind, and then you're focusing, but then at the same time, you've got ideas and other things cropping up in your mind. So I wonder if wisdom can arise from two things. One is maybe understanding or getting that better sense of emptiness on one hand, but then also on the other hand, as you see things popping up in your mind periodically, then you can dissect those and say, okay, well, this is this thought that keeps coming up. This is this type of a thought. And I can now try and ask, why does that thought arise? What's behind it? And then I gain wisdom and I can later on suppress that thought because I know it's just a thought that periodically shows up and it's dealing with anger being resurrected or something like that. Do you see two types of wisdom there, or were you referring to one in particular?
Yeah, so I wasn't, often in Buddhist teachings, wisdom stands for a particular realization about the nature of reality. And you mentioned it there. It's kind of like the tagline is emptiness. I'm not talking about that here. This is sort of general purpose, generic. I mean, you could use your intelligence. I'm listing off the synonyms here. You can use your intelligence, comprehension, understanding, discerning analysis, and so on. You could use that to explore the nature of reality, but it could also just be understanding your mind, saying, oh, here comes that thought again. Yeah, I've been over this ground a few times, and it really hasn't been very fertile. So I'm going to turn my attention to something else. Like, for example, I'm just going to stop, take a breath, look around. Oh, what could I be doing? So that's a good question, Bill. I'm going to kind of divide things up maybe a little bit differently into two different types of meditation. I'll call them stabilizing meditation and analytical meditation. And maybe that will get a little bit at your question. I don't know. It's so it's like a pizza. There's an infinite number of ways to cut up a pizza. It doesn't mean that cutting it up in a certain way, like the usual pie-shaped or square. I know a monk that likes his like cut in a grid, or like, I don't know, rings or something. I mean, it's still the pizza is still going to taste the same. So I'll give you that my version of the pizza in a little bit. Good question, Bill. Thank you for bringing that up. So I talked about three mental factors. There's a fourth one, which isn't kind of in the official list of 51 different mental factors. Don't worry, there's no test, so there won't be a question on the 51 mental factors on the non-existent test. It's not really one of those 51. These are from the Abhidharma texts, the great Indian kind of compilations of knowledge. And there's the fourth one called introspective awareness, and it's an interesting one. it's closely related to mindfulness. So introspective awareness is a mental factor that is aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it or should do it. So this, in a way, is kind of watching what's going on. It's sort of like a regulator or a governor in our mind. And mindfulness and introspective awareness are intricately related. You guys were actually employing mindfulness and introspective awareness during the meditation because you were doing your best, even while I was, going blah, 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 you're doing your best to keep your attention on your breath. But you are also aware when you would say lost track of the count or you came off of the breath. And being aware of something like that happening is introspective awareness. So in a way, as mindfulness decreases, that's when introspective awareness comes in and tells us, okay, first of all, this is not what I decided to put into my mindfulness. And next, this is what I should do in order to remedy that. This is the antidote I should apply. So here, Mina, this gets a little bit to your question of toolbox. Well, introspective awareness isn't particularly designed to combat any of the afflictions like ignorance of reality, like anger, attachment, greed, pride, and so on. It gives us that first access into knowing and becoming aware, sort of self-referentially almost, of what's going on. And then we learn other tools, in Buddhist studies, or even just, there's so many other sources of great advice. We can begin to apply those, and maybe through, self-investigation, know which ones work better for us, which ones, not so much. So in meditation and mindfulness, so all of these factors are pretty much in our mind all the time. But in meditation, mindfulness counteracts forgetting the meditation object, while introspective awareness protects against and remedies hindrances like distraction and dullness. So by developing mindfulness, introspective awareness automatically follows. They're kind of linked together. So the stronger your mindfulness becomes, the better your introspective awareness, and vice versa. The better your introspective awareness, the stronger your mindfulness. So they're factors that are interrelated. You can think of it as kind of an awareness of the self, a monitoring, a vigilance, a spy in the mind. And we use that example, spy in the mind, because if things are going well, it should be way in the background. We're having a good meditation session. Our mindfulness is strong. We're able to stick with the breath for maybe seconds at a time. And then so vigilance, just sort of stays in the shadows. Introspective awareness just sort of stays in the shadows. But once, we start struggling a little bit, maybe, doing the old head bobs or whatever, that's when we begin noticing this. And introspective awareness also kind of helps us with the particular remedies to those problems. It knows those as well. I'll give an analogy for those three. Just maybe let me know if it doesn't work for you. I've got a few of them. But think of, your brain is working together. Think of it like a camera on a tripod pointed at a scene you want to capture. So the tripod holding the camera steady is like mindfulness. The lens that focuses the image till it's pin sharp, picks up all the detail and color. That's like concentration. So it focuses, brings in the image, and then the film that captures the color, detail, texture, light, and shade of the scene, and seen here as the meditation object, is like wisdom. So it's really what captures the essence of that scene. I don't know, was that good? Maybe you want to think about it. And here's an analogy for mindfulness and introspective awareness. So an elephant that's being trained, that's the mind. A sturdy post is the meditation object. The rope that ties the elephant to the post is mindfulness. And the goad of the elephant trainer that trains the elephant to stay with the post is introspective awareness. So that captures those four mental factors, all in that image. It's an interesting image. Go ahead, Mina, ask your question or comment.
Could you say that again, please? Could you repeat it?
Yeah, an elephant that is being trained is the mind. A sturdy post is the meditation object. So you're training the elephant not to like run off in the jungle and, crush the villagers and knock over all the huts and everything. And so you have a sturdy post, that's the meditation object that you want the elephant to stick by. So the rope tying the elephant to the post is mindfulness. And the goad, or the stick that trains the elephant to stay with the post, is introspective awareness. The elephant begins to pull on that rope, begins to yank on it, tries to get away. Then it's the goad that the elephant trainer uses to get the elephant to go back and stay with the post.
Oh.
Did that help, Mina?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good, thank you. What's interesting in this particular analogy is, the mind can be like that rogue elephant, can't it? I know my mind has gone rogue quite often and knocked over huts and stuff like that. Also, though, what's interesting about this is, once the elephant is trained, the rope doesn't really have a lot to do. It's almost a natural function. So that's something perhaps that we could hope for, maybe sometime in the distant future. But that is a quality of mindfulness. That as we train our mind, it actually becomes easier. The effort is less, the distractions fewer, less strong. Well, that was our review. I took more time going through this review because we're all new here. So were there any kind of comments, questions? Maybe Kyla, does this kind of jive with what you might have learned in your tradition?
Yeah, I think that I'm really appreciating the level of detail, in describing the and breaking down the process. Like, I'm not sure that that I, have had it described like this intricately. Maybe it's been more open, kind of open season.
Yeah, and there's different traditions.
but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like it gives you some structure more structure to work with. And I like that.
Yeah. In a way, it's kind of like, yoga class, right? You can go to a yoga class, vinyasa, there's the yoga teacher, okay, saying, giving you the different like sequence of poses and just saying, okay, next, 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 next. And that can be very interesting and educational. But then there's other yoga classes where they break it right down to, okay, so what is my little toe doing right now?
Mhm.
What is my posture? Where is my mind?
Yeah, it was bringing back like different times in my life of meditating, and gosh, I wish I had that knowledge then, because I was feeling more lost, I think, at the time in meditating.
Yeah, so I think what I'll do is I'm sorry, I should have just checked with you, Kyla. Is there anything else you wanted to say there, or?
No, that's good.
Okay, that's great. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Mhm.
That's educational to me too. Yeah, I kind of hinted at this for Bill. There's two basic types of meditation, and they're called analytical and stabilizing. So in this particular system, there's two main types: stabilizing and analytical. Both are necessary for complete development of the mind. In general, what we mean by stabilizing meditation is the cultivation of something called calm abiding. You can think of it as like the final achievement, that is calm abiding. It's the final achievement when you've perfected your stabilizing meditation. But really, it's just keeping a meditation object in mind so that it's clear and vivid for as long as you want. Okay. I can't really, there's, minutes, hours, days. That's in the literature. I can't say that I've had any experiences, of extreme stability, but apparently it's been attested to. And at the highest level, that's called calm abiding. And that's the goal in the end. But you can think, if you're able to hold a particular object of your choice, something that will do you good, do others good in your mind for that long, you can think about, wow, how familiar, how powerful my realization, how easily it will come to mind again. So that's stabilizing meditation. Mina.
What do you mean by holding something in your mind? Like, do you mean the meditation where you sit and you're looking at an object?
In this particular, that's a great question. In this particular tradition, it's said that it doesn't involve any of the senses. You might begin, by, a breath is the perfect example. It's a physical sensation. It's our body sense that is, perceiving the breath. Your eye sense will perceive, a certain scene, maybe like even something like a candle or a pebble or a stick, or a certain type of illumination going on. You could also say, I don't know, meditate on the sound of birds or something. But really, in this tradition, meditation, this type of single-pointed, calm, abiding meditation, is purely on a mental object. And they say, and again, I haven't had any experience of this, but that as you become more familiar with the meditating on the physical process of the breath, however you wish to do that, and eventually your apprehension of it becomes so subtle, it turns into a mental object.
Oh, so what you're talking about right now is the calm abiding is focusing on the breath.
That's typically how it's developed and how you work with it on a basic level. But calm abiding can be any particular kind of concept, kind of thought, a visualization. For example, a visualization of the Buddha or some other object that's sacred to you, and so on.
In the mind, right? You're
In
not
the
like,
mind,
got it.
in the mind. You might say use an image of the Buddha to, like, first of all, initiate your mental image in the mind. And then you might look at it after a little while and refresh that image and kind of remind yourself of certain details. You might like go through the face and look at some of the details of the face, the eyebrows, say the crown protrusion and so on. So you could do that, but you would return to visualizing it mentally. Am I kind of helping you out here, Mina?
Yes, I'm totally getting that. I think for me, I've only done the breath.
Mm-hmm.
And I have tried in another workshop I've been in where like your eyes are a little open, but you're focusing, like you're not focusing on anything in particular, you're just gazing straight.
Right, right. So, yeah, and that instruction is sometimes given. You can, whatever works for you. You can have your eyes wide open. You can have your eyes hooded or slightly closed, like you were describing, Mina.
Yes.
Or you can have them completely closed. If they're completely open, you're subject to distraction, right? You start looking around the room. You can't help it. It's natural. And you're subject to excitement, which is kind of a subcategory of distraction, because all this light is coming in and maybe your mind is getting more excited. And it's harder to just stick with one object. That's more of a kind of a subtle type of distraction. If your eyes are closed, it's a lot easier you've got strong associations with closed eyes and sleep, napping. So if your eyes are completely closed in meditation, then it's a lot easier to kind of sort of even very subtly become dull, kind of sinking, lack of energy, and so on when you're looking at your meditation object, or you could just plain fall asleep. So why they say sometimes, just to have the eyes just partly open is to bring in some light, but just a little bit, but not so much that you have kind of like a strong visual imprint on your retina. You just have a little bit of light coming in, keeping your mind elevated to some extent. If your eyes start to flash open, or if they start to flutter closed, then you're dealing with either excitement or dullness. So it's kind of like it's just like a marker that's letting you know. But you're not really looking at anything. You're just kind of, at least in my view, you're not looking at anything. You're just like letting the light come in. But, again, the senses, when you're like looking at a mental object, the senses begin to withdraw somewhat. The Sanskrit term is pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses. And typically in this particular tradition, any of these kind of sense inputs are considered to be distractions. Although the breath is a very, very important meditation object because of all of its other positive qualities. And for us beginners like me, the breath is a great object. I think I'll I'm going to skip some material. I feel like we've spent our time well on kind of the review and so on. And I definitely don't want to go over time. I want to leave you guys with at least one more meditation. I think I'll say this though. So I should finish what I was saying about calm abiding or stabilizing meditation and analytical meditation. So we should be generating both of these. If we cultivate one but not the other, since both are necessary, that is stabilizing on a particular object to help train our mindfulness, and then also doing analysis, looking at what's going on in our mind or turning over certain concepts, maybe even some of the stuff that I've talked about tonight. You might want to examine it in your own context, in your own perspective, with your own experience. So that's more analytical meditation. So, and it can seem a little bit contradictory. If mindfulness is keeping just one thing in your mind, then how can I go through a chain of reasoning? That is conceptual thought, induction, or maybe you're just going through a particular meditation, say the, exchanging self with others in order to develop compassion, or the 7-point meditation on cause and effect to develop compassion. These are particular kind of reasonings that you go through and that you repeat in order to fix in your mind. How can that be like, how can you involve mindfulness in that? Well, here in this tradition, when discerning analysis, that is any type of like inductive logic, deductive logic, or series of reasonings, when discerning analysis is applied to an object held by mindfulness, this can involve thinking, reflection, contemplation, using various concepts, calling to mind scriptural quotations, and correct reasoning. So mindfulness permits this. It doesn't exclude thinking or concepts in this presentation. Functional ways of thinking, what I just described, analytical, if you will, functional ways of thinking and reflecting facilitate a better understanding of the object of mindfulness under investigation. So there's a certain amount of kind of determination in the sense that when you're looking at a particular thought chain of thoughts, your thought process, reasoning, you're sticking to that. And that's where mindfulness comes in. And then each link in that chain is also held mindfully. So with that understanding, then it's correct to say that mindfulness is also important for analytical thought and meditation. So it helps us understand the object of mindfulness that we're investigating, leading to wisdom and insight. And mindfulness is not contradictory to this and can further facilitate our ascertainment of the true characteristics of the object. Dysfunctional involuntary thinking, rehashing that difficult interaction you had this morning, or that familiar and unwelcome chain of thought, whatever it is, dysfunctional involuntary thinking that we Buddhists associate with the affliction, is abandoned and here we mean suppressed, it's a technical point, is suppressed by our cultivation of mindfulness, focused on a virtuous object. So basically, to sum up, practicing mindfulness does not mean we are not allowed to think and reflect. That's a little bit of a fine point there. And there's often, there's something very similar, for example, if you're doing very elaborate visualizations, deities and so on, the way that is regarded is that is stabilization meditation. But it moves from object to object to object very deliberately. And I guess, again, it's all a continuum, moving from object to object to object very deliberately. And when I say object, it might mean a particular item you're visualizing mentally, or it might mean, one step in a chain of reasoning. When you're moving from one to the next, to the next, eventually that could blend into or become an analytical meditation. Were there any questions at this point? Well, let's do another meditation and wind up. This will probably take us to our the end of our 90 minutes. So again, I can see you guys are pros. Even before I started, you're getting yourselves nicely relaxed and so on. So we talked about that physically, right? Physically relaxed, still. So in order to achieve stillness, you might want to move a little bit, make sure you're comfortable, and yet vigilant. And physically, vigilance is really, it's promoted by the posture, and in particular, the way you hold your spine. It's held naturally. It's subtle in a way, because it's almost as if I can't really describe it other than to say that you're raising your sternum, dropping your shoulders, maybe bringing your shoulder blades back together, the back of your body a little bit, just so it's comfortable. But all of this is meant to just allow the spine to be upright, but in a natural way. And then after a little bit, it almost feels like the spine is energized. This is where we kind of go from, I guess, a physical sensation to almost a mental sensation of energy within the spine. So you can feel the spine energized. The chin is just tucked in a little bit to help with that natural shape of the spine. And it's maybe directed downwards slightly, maybe, 6 or 10 feet in front of you if you're sitting in a chair. That's where it would point. And then finally, to kind of complete that physical vigilance, what this tradition recommends is placing the tongue very lightly, the back of the top teeth, just touching the palate. The idea there is that as you become more engaged in your meditation, it helps stop or at least reduce the flow of saliva so you're not swallowing all the time. But also, I think that gentle pressure of the tongue on the palate also kind of energizes or augments the brain a little bit. So just get comfortable. Nothing to do. You just relax and listen to me describe first the preparation for this mindfulness of breathing with vividness. So we're adding another layer here. We're going to be mindful of our breath, just like we were with the first meditation. But we're engaging now with the breath. We're trying to maintain a sort of engagement or vividness of the breath. And we've just given all the physical cues to our mind by maintaining a posture of physical vigilance. And so as we get prepared here, I'll just share these words with you. At all times, we try and value the quality of our meditation over the quantity of time spent in each session. If you sit for long periods, but let your mind rove around unnoticed among distractions or fall into dullness, not only are you wasting your time, but you are also developing bad habits that will only get harder and harder to break. And so if you have to, if you're finding it difficult to concentrate, you can even break your session, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you like to do, into mini sessions, where you maybe practice fully with a sense of perseverance, a sense of effort, for only 30 seconds. And then just relax very gently and subtly for a little while, and then another 30 seconds, and so on. That's how you can break up a longer meditation session if you're having difficulty staying focused. So from the beginning of our training in meditation, for most people, the primary problem for us in this phase of practice is still distraction. So that's when our brain gets excited and gets sidetracked. I mean, the thoughts will still come, but they come with more force, and we have less strength to resist them. That's kind of what's going on with distraction. That's pretty common. However, some people are more prone to laxity. Neither is better. These are both issues that we want to address. What I mean by laxity, it's what manifests in different degrees, but really the most coarse degree or strongest degree, if you will, that happens when your attention mostly disengages from the object and sinks into a spaced out vacancy. I know some days I certainly experience that. It's just like everything is sort of gray, formless, dull. So this particular fault in meditation is like having the reception of a radio station mostly fade out, even without interference from another channel. Abiding in a state of coarse laxity can be very peaceful, with your mind relatively undisturbed by thoughts or emotional upheavals. But if you spend many hours each day in such a state of dullness, Tibetan contemplatives report that this not only has no benefit, it can actually impair your intelligence. The acuity of your mind starts to atrophy, and over the long term, this can do serious damage. So that's just the preparation. And again, that is really the reason why we're looking at mindfulness of breathing with vividness. So again, just check back with your body, making sure you're settled in its rest state with relaxation, physical stillness, and physical vigilance. It's a continual process of tuning these. Take 3 slow, deep breaths, breathing down into the abdomen and then into the chest. And just let your awareness permeate your body. Here is the, I guess you could call it, classic trajectory of a meditation session. So mentally, the initial emphasis in this practice is on relaxation, which we try to induce by attending to the sensations of breathing throughout the body. So that's the first step, is just to become relaxed. This kind of sets a neutral stage, neither excited nor dull. And then the second emphasis is on the stability of attention. This is mindfulness, what we've been talking about. Just keeping the attention on the breath. Again, if you like, you can use counting, as long as that's not too distracting. Once we establish a foundation of relaxation and stability, we're going to try and cultivate the vividness of our attention on the breath, so the object doesn't change. We just want it to feel more clear, more lucid, more vivid, more engaging. In doing this, it's crucially important that the stability is not gained at the expense of relaxation. So don't push too hard to try and lock in your attention. It's more like the way you hold an object might be the way you hold the hand of a child when you're crossing a busy intersection. Gently but firmly. So we don't want to push too hard on the stability, thereby losing relaxation. But we also want to increase the vividness, our engagement with those sensations of the breath in the belly, but not so much that it decreases the stability. The relationship among these three qualities can be likened to the roots, trunk, and foliage of a tree. As your practice grows, the roots of relaxation go deeper. The trunk of stability gets stronger. And the foliage of vividness reaches higher. How do we do this? How do we increase vividness? Well, one way is to elevate the focus of your attention, directing it to a subtler object. We were watching the breath in our belly, in our abdomen. Well, let's tighten that focus down to the tactile sensations of your breath at the apertures of your nostrils. So it's more constrained in space, more subtle. All you're feeling now, instead of the movement of the abdomen and the diaphragm and the lungs and so on, you're focusing just on the passage of the air during the in and outflow of your breath. Elevating the focus of attention helps induce vividness, and attending to a subtle object enhances that further. What that means is even taking your attention up the body increases vividness. And the airflow at the nostrils is far more subtle than the movement of the abdomen, the diaphragm, and the lungs. You can break it down even more. Observe these sensations at the gateway of the respiration, even between the breaths. Can you notice an ongoing flow of tactile sensations in the area of the nostrils and upper lip? Can you feel that the breath has a different temperature even? Breathing in is cool. Breathing out is warm. As best you can, just sustain your attention there as continuously as possible. If thoughts intrude, which is inevitable, just gratefully recognize them, courtesy or introspective awareness. But don't hold on to them, just let them go. And gently bring the attention back to the breath at the nostrils. If the breath becomes so subtle that you can't detect the sensations of its flow, quiet your mind and observe more carefully. As you do that, as you arouse the vividness of attention, eventually the sensations of the breath will become evident again. Well, that completes the meditation. I'll wind up here, but if there are any questions, comments, if you've got thoughts in your mind, anything I might have said that didn't quite make sense, welcome to ask.
I've got a question.
Of course, Mina, go ahead.
Um, how long do you like I'll be very enthusiastic and I'll start a meditation practice.
Right.
And I'll have the intention of, I want to this is part of my lifestyle, like it is brushing my teeth. And then I
Yeah.
fall off the wagon. And when I
Yeah.
fall off the wagon, it seems really difficult to get back. Like, how can I build up so that I have a morning routine and an evening routine.
Yeah. So that's always tough, isn't it? I mean, it's that thing with meditation. It's like so easy just to set it aside,
Yes.
isn't it? And then you're like, oh, I'll start tomorrow. I'll start back tomorrow.
Yeah. Is it like if at least we do 5 minutes, and I know you can do it anywhere. Like I've understood that it doesn't have to be, you can, but there are times that you can just sort of do your meditation practice anywhere. But is it like, do you get benefits if it's 5 minutes, or should it be like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Like, what is the optimum time?
Well, it depends.
Mm,
But really, it's a very personal. It's a very personal thing. It depends like where you are in terms of your life, your makeup. But I definitely think that you can get actually very positive benefits from even 5 to 10 minutes a day. That said, it has to be consistent.
right. Yes.
So, what I would say is if you feel like there's a trade off in your life, better to do 5 minutes or 10 minutes every day than, try and do, okay, I'm going to make up for the past 3 weeks that I haven't been meditating by just doing meditation on the breath for 90 minutes. That's probably not a good idea. So, I'm being silly because, but no, seriously, it comes down to consistency. So start with something that you can handle, and then come back to it consistently. And you said another thing about routine. That's really critical. I mean, for example, do you brush your teeth every morning?
Yes.
Okay. How often do you miss that?
Never.
Okay, that's even better. I miss sometimes when I get like distracted, but pretty much, I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to, I don't want to go around without brushing my teeth. One thing you can do is you can link habits. What that means is you start with a habit that's rock solid. It doesn't have to be brushing your teeth, but something like that. And then you say, okay, immediately after that, I'm going to do my meditation, just 5 minutes. I mean, you may have other things that you do in like your morning routine, but at some point, like you might have a cup of tea, but then you do your meditation.
Got it.
So you're building, when I say linking habits, you're taking a strong habit that you have, and then you're one that you want to promote, and you're putting those together. It's like every time, as soon as I finish brushing my teeth or I finish my cup of tea, I'm going to meditate.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Another thing you can do is generally you have a meditation space. I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It kind of can depend on your personal circumstances. But if you set that space up so that it's very easy to just sit and do your 5 minutes, your 10 minutes, then you don't even have to think about it. In fact, you don't think about it. You just go and you sit and you do your meditation. So making it as easy as possible to begin is another little trick you can use. I don't know, would that apply to your situation? I mean,
Yes. I think it just has a lot to do with laziness too. Laziness in my mind. Like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or I don't know. I don't know why meditation just seems to escape my enthusiasm to.
I mean, I hear you. I know what you're talking about. So in the classical presentation, there are 8 antidotes to issues with meditating.
Okay.
4 of them are directed towards laziness. So you are not unique. All of us, I think, struggle more or less now and then with laziness. So I can get into this maybe next week and talk a little bit more about it. But laziness is kind of a big issue. Let's see, what else can I say? Yeah, so one thing to think about is just find a regular time in your existing daily routine. So that was habit stacking. Make it easy to practice by preparing a calm and pleasant place, somewhere you want to go, that you can easily just jump on the cushion. Start really small and simple, just a few minutes at first. You may find if you've taken a break that even 5 minutes or 10 minutes seems long. Well, you can break that up into like 30-second mini meditations. That is totally valid. First of all, because it's still helpful. And second of all, it just kind of helps you build that habit through familiarity. Focus on stuff you like to do in your meditation. So just simple calming the mind, and choose meditations you find easy and rewarding. So even just like the first part of a meditation session where you just sit down and relax the body and calm the mind, just do that. Don't worry about meditating on the 18 types of emptiness or anything like that. Just do something that's going to attract you to the cushion. And one thing you can do is finish, even if it's 5 minutes, finish each session on a good note by just looking at yourself and the effects, appreciating any calmness you feel. So just like take a moment afterwards, appreciating any calmness, relaxation, maybe some like realization that you've had. So just take 30 seconds at the end of your meditation session and just kind of, well, rejoice. And I think we all struggle with this. We all want to be good people and, first-class meditators and everything, but expectations can really derail us. So try to avoid having expectations or a timetable. Go ahead, Nina.
Should we be doing it at the same time every day? Like you were just talking about, like consistency. So like if it is it advisable to do it before we go to bed? Because like
Yeah.
also a good time where you're not having to do things like a to-do list that you got to do. Like I find if I do it before I go to bed, it's better. And then when I wake up in the morning, it's better. But like in terms of consistency time, like is it okay to do maybe 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, and then maybe in the evening we build up to work it to maybe 15, 20, like that?
Yeah, I mean, whatever works for you. What I would say is start with something really simple and get that established. And then if you want to have like a meditation in the morning and in the evening, try that next.
Okay.
If that gets to be too much, go back to whichever one worked best for you. Morning or evening depends on the person.
Sure.
It depends on your physical makeup, Maybe you just want to like fall asleep when, in the evening, or maybe in the morning, you're just too groggy and you just need to get moving and do stuff. And so that's not a good time. So it depends. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, of course. But again, try not to have any expectations, or I said timetable. And what that means is not when you do it, but having an expectation that in 3 months, I am going to be able to levitate. Right? That's That's kind of self-sabotage. So just really be non-judgmental, accepting, engaged, and curious about what's going on as you develop your meditation habit. And then in a sense, that makes it more interesting. You say, oh, what am I going to find today on the meditation cushion? I'm going to find that monkey mind, or maybe I'll just like be like stable. Who knows? Remember that it takes at least a month of consistent practice to establish a habit, or sometimes as long as a year. Seems like for me, it takes like longer rather than shorter. So moderate your expectations. Low expectations, not no expectations. All right. Any more questions? Thank you for your patience, all of you. I hope that kind of that last little bit, I'm really glad, Mina, that you asked those questions, because those are challenges. I mean, we're talking about like high level meditation theory here, but sometimes it's just laziness and, lack of energy, and all of that is our biggest obstacle. So thank you, Mina, again. So we'll end up with, let's just do a quick prayer. You guys have done an amazing job. You've really you've listened, you've been patient, you've absorbed all of this material. Hopefully you'll apply it to your lives for your own benefit and the benefit of all of those around you. What that does is that creates some incredibly powerful, virtuous karma, whether you think of it or not, having that motivation and then going through the action. So you've actually created an incredible amount of virtuous karma. What we want, though, as Buddhist practitioners, or just try this on if you're not a Buddhist practitioner, is we want this positive karma to come to fruition in a particular way, in a spiritual way, really, that will help us and help others. So that's why we take this substance, the virtuous karma, and we dedicate it. And the classic dedication is where we say, due to the merits of these virtuous actions, our meditation class tonight, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha. May I myself become a Buddha. Why? So that I can lead all living beings, without exception, into that same state. That's Mahayana Buddhism. So, from the 10th chapter of Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva, the dedication chapter, for as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. Thank you very much.